You are experiencing the small hours.
Hello, welcome to the Small Hours. My name's Matt Warren. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to talk about a short story that's been a big influence on my own art practice and an influence on a lot of people's filmmaking, storytelling, art practices in general. It's called An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and it's written by Ambrose Bierce. It was written in 1890. Ambrose Bierce was a Civil War veteran and wrote, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and wrote in a kind of a satirical style, although he dabbled in science fiction, all kinds of different styles actually. And although it's possibly not the earliest example of it, it's certainly a fairly early version of the, a kind of stream of consciousness style of narrative writing, and could be an early example of that idea of, the life flashing before your eyes in a moment of, stress or danger or doom or something like that. So it's in some ways it's actually been quite influential across a whole variety of mediums. For want of a better word, or I won't necessarily give you any spoiler by telling you the basic plot, but as you can see on this book cover, by the way, this book cover, or this book here, is one of those Penguin 60s that came out in the mid 1990s, so it's kind of like the miniature version of a book. This is not a difficult book to get hold of nowadays, or this story is not a difficult thing to get a hold of nowadays. And so I would highly recommend that you get it if you can track it down. It's a really good read. But anyway, the basically the plot is a criminal is at Owl Creek Bridge, where, as you can see here, there's a hangman's noose for crimes. He's going to be hung, but at the last minute the rope breaks and he escapes, and then some adventures happen. He goes and meets people he hasn't seen for a long time, goes to different places, so on and so forth. But there's a strange kind of disconnect, unusual kind of mood about the whole thing that's ongoing. So it's a cockatoo outside. And so this creates this kind of unusual, surreal atmosphere in the story. And as I say, it's been quite influential to all kinds of different people, including filmmakers. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about three different versions of this story, or at least not necessarily a direct translation of this story, but a couple of iterations of the story structure as well. So first up, I'm going to talk about a thing called the Owl River. Hopefully you can hear me over that noise outside. Now, the Owl River was a French version of An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and it was directed by someone called Robert Enrico in 1962, and was in film festivals, I believe. I'm not sure whether it had a cinematic run, but eventually it got into the hands of the makers of The Twilight Zone, Ron Serling and so on, and it appeared as an occurrence in 1964 on what I think is Series 5 of The Twilight Zone. I still have this VHS tape from back in the early 90s, but obviously I think The Twilight Zone is available, all the original series, at least on DVD and Blu-ray, so you should be able to track it down there if you're interested in seeing it. But this is quite a straight version of the story, and it's been translated fairly directly from that. But it does have a very eerie quality to it. Very befitting for the Twilight Zone. But speaking of eerie, possibly my favourite version of the story, although it's not direct. This one's not direct, but it takes some of the structure and the kind of the conceptual ideas of what the character goes through from Occurrence at Elk Creek Bridge. This is a fantastic film made by a guy called Herc Harvey in 1962. Herc Harvey was kind of like the head of a film company in Lawrence, Kansas, I think it is. And they were an industrial film group, made industrial films, educational films. This is the only feature-length film that he made, I believe. And like I say, it's not a direct copy of the story, but it takes some of those structures and that idea of the life flashing before your eyes in a moment of stress. Well worth looking for this film if you haven't seen it. Big influence on George A. Romero for Dawn of the Dead. I suspect David Lynch probably saw this as well and maybe borrowed some of the textures when making Eraserhead. This is the Criterion Collection versions. Beautiful edition of it on Blu-ray. Looks fantastic. And it's, very, very moody and very ethereal. And then another example of that film or that story structure that was brought in on Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge was a film called Jacob's Ladder, made by Adrian Lyne, directed by Adrian Lyne in 1990. I'm not a big fan of Adrian Lyne's films, generally speaking. However, this one's a little bit of an anomaly in his career, if you like, and creates this very, very surreal atmosphere. Again, this idea of what you're seeing may be just imaginary or maybe inspired by kind of a psychological state that you're not sure why you're having that. And again, it's a really, really, really good film. It doesn't, it stars Tim Robbins, a very young Macaulay Culkin's in it as well. So again, it's well worth looking out for. There is, I believe, a remake of this. I haven't seen it. I tend to not be a fan of remakes, as they generally don't seem necessary. However, it could be fine. I don't know. But certainly this one is a really good film. And it has aged quite well considering some of the effects. It's all visual and analog effects in it. So it's very... of its time and place, but it's a great film. So that brings me to the end. So I would like you to just check out An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, written by Ambrose Bierce, or some of the film iterations, moving image iterations of it over the years. Thanks for watching.